Welcome to the programme. Tonight, a former US diplomat warns the war with Iran could lead to an even more extreme regime. And the Albanese government considers a request to help defend Gulf states from Iranian attacks. Shortly, I'll speak to the Shadow Defence Minister, James Patterson. Also coming up is the price of food about to skyrocket, how the war is impacting us here at home. And protesters plead with the government to offer the Iranian women's soccer team asylum in Australia, fearing if they return home, they could be jailed or even killed. First, as American and Israeli airstrikes against Iran enter a second week, a former top US diplomat says efforts to topple Iran's leadership may have the opposite effect. Adam Harvey reports.
Our objective is to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. It was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack if we didn't do it.
The attacks on Iran have been methodical, clinical and effective. While the justifications of exactly why America is doing it and what it wants to achieve have been imprecise.
I feel very badly for the people of Iran. They've lived in hell.
Iran tried to kill President Trump, and President Trump got the last laugh.
It has, in fact, surprised me that, we're this far into the conflict and the objectives have not been yet clearly articulated to the American people.
I'm Katatan Bash.
Jennifer Govito is a former US ambassador and State Department official overseeing Iran. Over her years with the US Foreign Service, officials repeatedly explored the implications of striking Iran's leadership.
Every war game, every tabletop exercise that has been run by the United States and I think our allies over the last decade or so has led to the same conclusion. And that is, if you try to impose regime change from the outside, the most likely outcome is that the IRGC would amass greater control, consolidate control, leaving a harder line government in Iran than the one that you started out with.
The IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, is the nation's most powerful military and political force. 8 days into this war, its grip on power seems as tight as ever. Is there any danger that these attacks strengthen the IRGC?
I think so. The Islamic regime was suffering from great domestic pressure and lack of legitimacy. There have been continuing protest with brutal crackdown, create a huge solidarity among people against the regime. But this pressure actually will make the regime more solid and more extreme.
There are no signs that there will be a popular uprising in Iran. There's no unifying opposition figure. The opposition itself is not armed, not capable of undergoing a major uprising.
Donald Trump said he wanted to help pick Iran's new leader.
We don't want to come back every 5 years or every 10 years and do this, so we want to pick a president that's not going to be leading their country into a war.
Iran ignored him, today announcing the assassinated Ayatollah Khamenei would be replaced by his 56-year-old son.
We allow nobody to interfere in our domestic affairs. This is up to the Iranian people to elect their new leader.
Last week, Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister told 730 that it will only be a matter of time before it kills Mujtaba Khamenei.
Anyone that will try and take the position of leading this fanatical regime, this destructive regime, who creates only death and destruction all around them, will be a target.
Dr. Ali Mamouri is an Australian academic who has lived and worked in Iran. He says that before this war, there had been resistance to the idea of a dynastic transfer of power.
But the pressure now changed the dynamic, and now most of the leadership are calling for someone like him because he's very solid, he's very strong, he's affiliated with the top IRGC commanders. So this is some kind of message to the US and Israel that the system is continuing and holding strong.
There may be little real political change inside Iran, but 1 week into the war, there have been immense regional consequences. In Lebanon, 500,000 people are on the move. The exodus is from the country's south, where Israeli ground forces are pushing in from the border. And they're also leaving from Beirut itself, with attacks on the southern suburbs and even tourist hotels.
Lebanon actually has at the moment a fairly unique opportunity with new president and government in place that seem committed to the disarmament of Hezbollah. And I know that that process is going slower than the Israelis would like, but I am concerned that these renewed operations and suggestions that they may seek to occupy southern Lebanon may actually undermine the Lebanese government.
Predictably, Iran has attacked US bases throughout the Gulf and Middle East. But it has also hit civilian infrastructure, like hotels, desalination plants and airports.
That is certainly a calculation, I think, that is meant to cause the Gulf states to put pressure on Washington to end the operation as quickly as possible. You know, for countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they are really, their economic viability has been built on this image of stability in a volatile region.
President Trump has also called on Iran's Kurdish minority, almost 10 million people, to rise against the regime. A people without a state, the Kurds live precariously in Turkey, Iraq, Syria and Iran.
I think we've set in motion a series of things that we're not in full control of. And certainly regional stability is at the top of that list. Whether the reports are true that the CIA is supporting Iranian Kurds in uprising or in fighting back against Iranian security services, this really puts that population in the crosshairs, both of the Iranian security services, but also Turkey and Iraq.
Inside Iran, authorities say more than 1,000 civilians have already died.
Of course, it's a very deep grief and sad moment for me, especially when I see civilians, little girls, 170 girls in a school, have been targeted and killed. Hospitals, state institutions, which is not belong to the government, belong to the nation. Any regime comes should use these institutions. It seems to me we are living in a moment of madness with no any clear reason for that war.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong has said that the government is considering providing military assistance to Gulf countries under attack from Iran. The government hasn't said which nation or nations have sought help. James Paterson is the Shadow Defence Minister. Welcome to the programme.
Good to be with you, Sarah.
Now, we understand the National Security Committee of Cabinet met this afternoon. Have you been briefed on a request from any of the Gulf countries for Australia to provide assistance, military assistance?
No, not at this stage, Sarah. We've made a request and the government has been good in facilitating requests like this in the past. So I anticipate that'll happen soon, but it hasn't happened yet.
Now, last week you said you weren't expecting such a request and didn't think that it was in Australia's core national interest. Would the coalition oppose a request of that nature?
I think actually, Sarah, what I said was I wasn't anticipating requests from either the United States or Israel to participate in their strikes against Iran, and my view remains the same, that Australia's core national interest is decided in the Indo-Pacific, and that joining offensive military operations in Israel, with Israel and the United States against Iran would have to meet an incredibly high bar to be justified. This, by the sound of it, from the Foreign Minister's limited public comments, is a different request. It sounds like a friendly nation to Australia, perhaps a Gulf state, that has been on the receiving end of some of the indiscriminate rocket fire from Iran, has asked for our assistance to help them deal with that threat. And I think we should consider that a request, although we have to carefully consider whether or not we have the capabilities available to contribute there, and that it would not in any way detract from our own core national interest in our own region.
Is it truly possible to distinguish 100% between defensive and offensive in a conflict of this nature?
I'm reluctant to speculate too much, but for the purposes of this exercise, let's say the request was for an ISR capability, an intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capability, like an E-7 Wedgetail, to be deployed to the region to assist in identifying incoming rocket fire or drone attacks from Iran to a Gulf state and to notify that Gulf state about that incoming fire so that they can deal with it. I think that would be plausibly a defensive capability. Some of the other distinctions that the government is seeking to draw in the public domain between offensive and defensive actions by Australia, I think, are harder to defend.
Let's talk about the possibility of a request which may come for Australian frigates to take part in clearance operations in the Straits of Hormuz. Would that be in the national interest, according to the coalition?
Well, again, it would depend on who has made the request, what the request is, and what the availability of those assets are. I think it's well known in the public domain that Australia has very limited surface vessel availability through the Australian Navy, and that we have a significant need for it here in our own region, both to protect our own economic and security interests in our immediate region, but also for the responsibilities we've agreed to uphold in international waters. For example, we participate in UN sanctions against North Korea and monitoring those sanctions against North Korea. And just last week, there was another incident involving a People's Liberation Army vessel in relation to an Australian Navy vessel as well.
Do you have any concerns that Australia is spending too much money on AUKUS and not enough money on anti-drone warfare?
I would express it differently. I strongly support every single cent that we're spending on AUKUS, but if we want to require AUKUS capability and also maintain other capable services in the ADF, including our Navy, Air Force and Army, then we need to increase defence spending, because right now defence spending as a proportion of GDP has essentially been flat over the last 4 years under this government. It has not increased from the 2% of GDP that the last government took it to, and therefore the expanding need for AUKUS capability, including the investment in defence infrastructure like Henderson and Osborne shipyards, is cannibalising the capability of other services. And that's why so much capability has been cancelled by this government, particularly in the Australian Army.
Let's talk about oil. We heard Donald Trump say today, short-term oil, he said this first on Truth Social, to be clear, short-term increases in oil prices is a very small price to pay for world safety. Do you agree with him?
Well, I hope that they are only short-term increases in oil prices, and as concerned as I am about increases on prices and the flow-on effects for Australian consumers and industry, I'm particularly concerned about any disruptions to oil supply. It is a foreseeable consequence of this conflict that the Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed to naval traffic, and that has flow-on consequences, and that's why successive Australian governments have thought it was important to legislate, as the previous government did, for minimum stock holding obligations to make sure that if there was an interruption to international supply, that we could survive that. So the government has very significant powers available to it. The Energy Minister, Chris Bowen in particular, has very significant powers available to him to intervene into the market to make sure that that supply is there for Australian industry and consumers.
The Nationals today say they want to revisit the policy of a cut to fuel excise. Obviously, people are starting to worry about the cost of fuels in Australia. Is that still coalition policy?
Well, as you know, Sarah, we reset our policy playbook after the last election for obvious reasons, given the election result. It's not currently coalition policy, and if we were to formally adopt it, we'll do so through our proper processes. The government should consider.
If we have obviously, fuel's going to be a big deal tomorrow in Parliament. If the Nationals are pushing for that, is the Liberal Party open to assuming that policy again?
Well, it's not a coalition position as yet because it hasn't gone through any of our processes yet.
Sorry, the Nationals are obviously very keen to bring it back. What do you think?
Well, understandably, a lot of their constituents and a lot of Australians are going to be hit by higher petrol and diesel prices in particular, and that's going to have consequences for their family budgets and their businesses. But the reality, Sarah, is we're not in government, and the earliest we could possibly be in government is in about 2 years' time, by which time I hope this crisis has passed. Really, the obligation is on the Albanese government to say what they are going to do. Has Chris Bowen used any of the powers available to him under the legislation the previous government passed to deal with these supply shocks? If so, what has he done? He hasn't made that public today. Are they contemplating any cuts, temporary or otherwise, to fuel excise? Only they have the levers available to them to do that.
Let's talk about the other the other event that happened overnight, which is the announcement that Mojtaba Khamenei will has taken over as the supreme leader. Can I get your response to that? Because clearly there was a lot of discussion about regime change, looking for a change in the way Iran is governed. Khamenei does not seem to present that. How do you respond to that news?
Well, I thought the experts that you had in your previous package who were warning about the risks of regime change from the outside, and particularly only through air power, were right to be sober and cautious about it. Obviously, it would be a good thing if the Iranian people were able to take charge of their destiny and choose their own leader, but that's very easy for us to contemplate in the security of a television studio tens of thousands of kilometres away, and it's a life or death decision for them. The best open source analysis I've seen is that the Khamenei the younger is no different to Khamenei the older, and that we should expect this to be relative continuity in terms of the regime. It's unlikely to be acceptable to the Iranian people, most importantly, nor the United States or Israel. The thing about authoritarian regimes, though, Sarah, that history shows us is they're quite brittle. They often appear very strong right up until the moment at which they break, and when they break, they shatter. It's why before 1989, many people did not predict the fall of the Berlin Wall and consequently the Soviet Union. The same could be the case here, and we will not know until after the fact why that's happened.
Nonetheless, does it make you concerned for the duration of the conflict?
I think the duration of the conflict will be dictated to by the United States and Israel's willingness and ability to continue to prosecute the conflict, and the Iranian regime's ability to resist it and to continue to raise costs for its neighbours through these indiscriminate attacks, including on energy supplies. If at any point the Iranian regime loses command and control and isn't able to continue to fire these rockets into its neighbours in the region, that will be a significant development. And if the United States or Israel make an assessment that continuing the bombardment airily is not going to change anything on the ground, that would be a significant development.
James Paterson, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The G7 finance ministers will meet later tonight to discuss the joint release of oil from global emergency reserves. The Iran war has sent oil prices soaring to the highest level since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. The financial pain will be felt beyond the petrol pump, with prices for everyday consumer items also expected to jump. Fiona Willan reports.
One can only take a look at the news and be very, very worried. We live at the mercy of energy that is being extracted far from homes.
Our problem is a problem of dislocation. It's a problem of logistics, and this is a serious problem.
In the Middle East, oil refineries are under attack and energy exports are stranded at sea. The impact of the war is starting to be felt in Australia.
So we've seen diesel increase in the last couple of days significantly. Diesel is really the lifeblood of the Australian trucking industry because we rely upon it so much.
This family-run company in Sydney owns about 50 trucks. Each month they make around 3,000 deliveries and spend around $150,000 on diesel.
So Simon, what sort of products would be in these containers?
These containers that you see all around here, you'd have foodstuffs, you'd have construction materials.
A significant spike in the price of crude oil will soon show up in the cost of anything that travels by truck.
Say for the month of April, you'll start to see prices rise because trucking companies won't be able to sustain absorbing those costs. Just about everything that comes to consumers comes to them via a truck. Once the prices for diesel goes up, you're going to see every consumer item, or almost every consumer item, go up in price.
The price of fuel is expected to rise further because tankers have stopped moving through a crucial shipping corridor in the Gulf due to safety concerns.
So Iran has basically suggested that they're going to set fire to any vessels that run through that region, and they've actually done that to a tanker already, and they've actually attacked some container ships recently as well. Basically, insurance companies have made their policies null and void, and all of a sudden the risk is on the shipping line. So they're not going to take that risk, and it'll take quite a while for that to recover.
About 20% of the world's oil and gas passes through the Strait of Hormuz between Iran, the United Arab Emirates and Oman. Donald Trump has promised to provide insurance to oil tankers travelling through the Gulf and potentially naval escorts.
Further action to reduce pressure on oil is imminent.
Cargo ships carrying other goods rely on the Strait too.
Primarily, most of our imports we get from there is fuel and fertilisers.
Justin Everett owns a wheat, canola and barley farm near Albury in New South Wales. He needs to buy fertiliser before seeding season begins next month. But the cost of urea has climbed between $300 to $400 a tonne.
I think it was a big shock, really, that these fertiliser prices have continued to rise even when they're already high. We can't handle that kind of cost. You start to think whether it's worthwhile even putting a crop in.
But the bigger problem in some regional areas is a sudden shortage of fuel.
It's just very hard to get hold of it, and its price has really risen quite rapidly.
It's due to a rapid surge in demand from drivers racing to fill up, despite the government saying there's no need to panic buy.
You feel like you're trying to fight with one arm tied behind your back, and it feels like you're battling the world at the moment.
While Australian beef producers face the opposite problem, losing access to lucrative export markets in the Middle East.
So when there's an issue like this and the goods can't get there, it's a matter of, can I redirect the cargo elsewhere? Can I get it to the final destination, or can I return the goods, or is it just going to be a total write-off?
International carriers have slapped massive surcharges on cargo affected by the crisis, and some have started offloading it at other ports.
It's almost like peak hour traffic where things just backlog and it's a wave effect. And that wave travels around the world globally.
Supply chains and energy markets are complex webs. A breakdown at a critical point can have a cascading effect. Since the conflict started, the global price of gas has also increased. If gas prices remain elevated, that could have a flow-on effect to household power bills.
When LNG prices go up, domestic gas prices tend to follow. The price of domestic gas has a disproportionate influence on the wholesale electricity price, which accounts for about 40% of the retail electricity price that householders see on their bills.
Economists say it's too early to tell what all of this will mean for underlying inflation and interest rates.
It's potentially very concerning if the conflict lasts for more than a couple of weeks. And I don't think anybody really knows at this stage how long it's going to last.
It will also depend on how long the vital shipping lane in the Middle East is held hostage and the extent of destruction in places that export energy to the world.
If sustained damage is done, then the effects of that could linger for some time after military hostilities have ceased. Then the consequences for the world and for Australia in terms of both inflation and economic growth could be quite serious.
Protesters believe they saw members of the Iranian women's soccer team asking for help through the window of the bus they were travelling in. The team is here in Australia for the Asian Cup. Laura Lavelle reports.
Outside a Gold Coast stadium, a bus slows to a creep, surrounded by protesters who fear for the lives of those inside. On board, Iran's best female soccer players who have just finished their final match on Australian soil, bound for their hotel. It was in this moment protesters say they witnessed an apparent call for help.
So we were worried, everyone were crying, asking police, please help them. Sorry. I feel hopeless.
Hadi Karimi was there. For him, it's been a sleepless night.
We see fear in them. We see fear. As we see they showing their hand to help. What does that mean? That means they cannot talk.
So Hadi, is there any doubt in your mind the symbol that those women were making on the bus was the symbol for help? They were asking you for help.
You can see it clearly. I will show you the video. 3 girls, like this.
There was some doubt as to whether the women would even be allowed to get out of Iran to come and compete here. With the war happening as well, it's just compounded an already very serious and tense situation.
This is what caught the attention of the Iranian regime last Monday. The women, ahead of their first Asia Cup match, failed to salute and sing the national anthem.
Despite all the dangers, all the threats to themselves and to their families, they still decided at the first game not to sing this regime's anthem. Very powerful, very moving to many of us. It made me cry myself, and it was really an emotional moment to watch.
An act of defiance, an act of dissidence. Iranian state media labelled them traitors. By the second match, 3 days later, it was clear that threat had been received. Last night, too.
And it was heartbreaking to watch, and it actually showed us the immense danger that they are in. This is an example of what Iranian women go through and how this coercion and oppression follows us everywhere that we go.
More than 60,000 people have now signed a petition calling on the federal government to grant the players asylum in Australia, fearing the athletes could be jailed or killed when or if they return. Reza Pahlavi, the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, echoed the call to ensure their safety and give them any and all needed support.
The question has to go back to the federal government, I would have thought, to ensure that if women are in the room to have these sorts of discussions, then that needs to guarantee that it is not in front of one of the officials from Iran.
Protesting against the Iranian regime is dangerous, but this is a particularly risky situation for the players who are staying in the hotel across the road from me. They face an impossible situation, one that won't be completely solved by an offer of asylum because their families are still in Iran and could face retribution. We're told Iranian protesters who speak out on foreign soil do so at great risk.
We not only get threatened ourselves, but also our families back in Iran get threatened. They receive phone calls, they get interrogated, and they are being asked to basically call us and tell us to close our mouth and not to speak up and not to say anything.
They face threats by the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, fundamental to the regime's survival and considered a terrorist organisation by the Commonwealth. It's behind at least 2 anti-Semitic attacks in Australia. Sports journalist Tracy Holmes says the team is dictated by the IRGC, with some officials travelling with them.
The Football Federation and the people that run football in Iran are very much aligned with the IRGC. So anyone who is an official with the team by default is part of that machinery.
7:30 put these allegations and questions about whether the women would be offered asylum to Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke, who declined to comment.
With every hour that counts down, you lose confidence that anything is going to happen.
If they want to go back, that's their choice. If they want to stay, that's their choice. But the point is that right now they don't even have the opportunity to speak their mind.